Hello and welcome to this Halloween themed video where I paint a adorable ghost dog. I don't know if you guys have seen on the Instagram and all the TikTok the ghost dog trend where people are literally putting a sheet on their dog and it's adorable. And I saw this picture on Unsplash. I couldn't resist, so we're painting this. And when I say we, I mean I am inviting you along as kind of like a free mini workshop. And you are welcome to click the link in the description and head on over to my website and download the traceable and the reference photo in color and black and white and paint along with me. And also, as an extra fun factor, I challenged myself in this video to paint this entire quarter sheet 11 by 14 size painting using just my Daniel Smith pet portrait dot card. So, and you can also grab that for free on my website as well. You pay shipping, or if you order paper, it comes for free. Guys, this was so much fun. And also a great way to learn how to paint white, because the sheet, we're just doing a lot of shadows. And so enjoy this journey with me. I'm so excited about this. So let's talk about this. Here I am doing step 1 of my pet portrait process, and that's eyes. I always start with the eyes. If you know anything about me, you know that. And here I'm using quinacridone gold, because I tell you what, if you want to capture light in eyes, quinacridone gold is like liquid sunlight. I always do, especially if the eyes are brown or green, I always do a layer of quin gold before I do anything else. And there's just something about that quin gold underlayer that captures the light. So the brushes that I'll be using today for this is my Polina Bright brush set. These are the round brushes that she sells. And I've had these for a couple years now. They're still going strong. And there is a link in the description to get 10% off on those as well. So I am not an affiliate yet, but I do have my own discount code. And so as soon as I get done doing the colored part, the iris, and any highlights that have color to them, then I can go ahead and go in with the blacks. And when I say black, you know I mean neutral tint. That is my go-to black. It is on my dot card. I love it. So here we're doing the eyeliner. We call it the eyeliner. And this brush I'm using right here is actually just a cheapo Hobby Lobby Master's Touch, I think, brush. I've been using this like crazy. It's got a short handle. I love it. I actually bought 2 of them. And if you can get the Hobby Lobby brushes when they are 40% off, it happens like every couple of weeks. Everything, all the art stuff goes on 40% or 50% off. So catch them then, and they're only a couple of dollars. So the Polina Bright set has the smallest brush is just not quite small enough for me. I didn't get her rigger brush. So anyway, so here after I get done doing the eyes, I went ahead and, did the area just around the eyes in the eye hole of the sheet. And I literally am using my dot card. Like, I'm not lying when I said I was going to use my dot card for this entire painting. You would not believe how much paint you can get from these tiny dots. It's amazing. Now, these little dishes I'm using are also from Hobby Lobby. They're like Condiment ceramic dishes. I have bought like 4 packs of them. They come in like a 5 or 6 pack. And I flipping love them. Oh my gosh. I like to choose around 5 colors for each painting that I do, and try to keep it a limited palette. And so it's nice that I can have 5 of these dishes set to the side. I've got my colors ready to go, and they're just perfect. I'll put a link to those in the description as well. Now, as I'm painting this, you can kind of see the colors I'm picking as I show my dot card. I've got Hematite Genuine and Burnt Umber were key to this painting to really achieve that texture of fur, because the hematite has such beautiful magnetic granulation, and then when you add the burnt umber, it gives it that brown factor. It's just perfect. This dog is so easy and so fun, and yeah, I hope you paint along with me. This was supposed to be a paid workshop, and my family was sick that week. My husband got food poisoning, and I was just like, you know, nobody really was signing up, and so I didn't push it. And I said, you know what, we're not doing it. And I decided to pay it forward and make it a freebie. Now, I'm not going into huge detail on what colors I'm mixing, but just know that every color I use here is on my dot card. So you can check that out, like I said, on my website. And here I am just layering. Something you'll miss in this video is that I am using my little heat tool in between every single layer. I am using my heat tool and drying. That is key in my pet portrait process, to put down a little bit of paint and then I dry it. Also, anytime I put down paint on dry paper, I'm always going to clean off my brush, and then I'm going to use that damp brush to kind of soften lines and spread it around. For the highlights of the eyes, I just went ahead and avoided them. So I'm trying to use the white of the paper. However, it's not always perfect. There are many instances where I have to go in with an opaque white medium at the end and kind of brighten up any of those highlights that I lost. I really like Dr. P.H. Martin's bleed proof white for this, or you could use like a titanium white. Gouache, even the Daniel Smith titanium white watercolor stick has been really good for highlights. It's just not as opaque as gouache or the bleed proof white. Now, obviously, the areas that are shadowed by the sheet around the dog's eyes, you need to make sure that you're adding a little bit of darker area to show that depth. Anytime you want something to come forward, you need to darken the area behind it, and that will bring it forward and create depth. And now I'm moving on to ears. So ears, I kind of went backwards on this. Normally I do eyes, nose, mouth, ears, but because of the sheet situation, it kind of threw me off. So I did eyes, ears, nose, mouth on this one. But ears are the easiest part of the pet portrait, in my opinion. The ears and the body are the funnest part. The ears you don't need to stress about. I cannot stress that enough. Haha, get it? Don't need to stress about it, but I'm going to stress it, that you just do not need to worry about every little detail on the ears. They are not the focal point. Ears are so simple. And there I did some water splatter. I like to often put down paint, and then I'll dip my hand in my water bucket, literally, and then just flick water onto the painting. It creates a really fun texture. So here I am using some burnt umber, a little bit of transparent red oxide. I just played around with the different colors on my dot card to see what would happen. And so this isn't really like a scientific process on this one. Normally in my workshops, I'm going to tell you exactly what color I'm using, what I'm mixing, and why. And on this one, it's more of like just have fun, you know? There's times I don't really want to plan ahead, and on this one, I did not plan ahead. I grabbed my dot card, I grabbed my reference photo, I did my drawing, and away I went, and I had so much fun. I mean, oh my gosh, it's already looking so cute. My favorite part of the painting process is when those eyes look like they are popping off the page at me. Here's just a little clip from my Instagram when I posted about this. All right, back to the dot card. What will I grab next? Okay, neutral tint. And I'm mixing it with Van Dyke Brown. Why? You can create a really rich, warm black by mixing those two colors together. So I'm doing that for the nostrils. On noses, I always work on dry paper first. I do the darkest values first. So I did my nostrils first, and then as you will see, I will do the line down the middle, around the bottom. And then once those are down and established, they become my roadmap. And then I can do a wet wash and then do some wet and wet. You'll see. A lot of artists will do like a layer of the lightest value first, and that is great. That is one way you can do it. But I started to find that when I did that, I would get to the ugly stage really fast, or I would lose my line drawing underneath, and I would just get frustrated and discouraged. So yeah, I like to get my darks out of the way. I get my darkest values down. I love painting on dry paper. Not sure what that's about. I love the texture. I love the control. I love that it doesn't dry later, but I do use wet and wet. I use all of it. So I just get those dark values down on dry paper first, then I'll rinse my brush, I'll go in, soften edges, and in that process, I'm adding water, and then I can begin like a wet and wet type situation. It's just what works for me. We have to do what works for you. I have actually had students have so much success following my way of doing things, but that doesn't mean it always works. Like, I really think it's important for us to take classes from other artists, see how they approach things. I learned so much while I was in Italy. I took a couple different workshops from some amazing artists, and some of them, the way they did things was so different. And I learned a lot, but it was so opposite of how I do. Okay, so here I am adding some chunky sea salt to the nose to kind of create a texture. Spoiler alert, it didn't really work just because that nose is so tiny, but you can kind of see the texture I got from it. I just end up putting so much paint over the top that I lose the texture. But you got to try that. There's a sweet spot for sure as far as putting salt down. There's a time where you need to do it where the paper's still a little bit wet, but it's not shiny. Because if you put the salt down too soon or too late, it won't work. So yeah, definitely take some time experimenting with salt in watercolor. It's very cool. It creates some really amazing textures. Something that I can't stress enough to people is that when you lay down paint, you lay down a layer of paint or a wash, try not to manipulate it too much once it's down. I don't even know what I just said. It's been a long day. Just try not to manipulate that paint too much, because those pigments, they really want to settle. They want to do their magic. They want to fight for space, as I recently heard an artist say, and I love that. That's why we love the magic of watercolor, is because it is so, it's beautiful, it's nuanced, it's luminous, and when we keep going over the same area again and again where we've just put down pigment, we lose that luminosity, and that's what creates kind of that overworked look. So I say that, but know that if you dry that layer, if you let that layer dry and let it do its thing, I'm not saying you can't go back in and layer over the top of it. I'm just saying while it's wet, once you put down wet paint, don't keep going back over and over and over the same pigment you just laid down unless you dry it and then you're putting a second layer. Hopefully that makes sense. Sometimes I watch people swatching, and I feel like there's an art to swatching for sure. But when I watch someone swatching and they lay the paint down and then they just keep taking their brush and going back and forth and back and forth, my head almost explodes because I'm just like, no, just leave the pigments, let them do their thing, stop it. But I digress. To each his own. We all have our own way, and that's the beauty of art. But I feel like what I have learned through my art journey is really about partnering with watercolor, partnering with the pigment, and understanding its qualities so that you can utilize them to the best of their ability, right? Like we want to be over controlling of the pigments, but if we understand how they work and how they move and how they granulate, then we can use them to their best of their ability. So here I am doing the muzzle. I'm pretty sure I'm using some burnt umber and possibly a little hematite, probably just burnt umber. One suggestion I have, if you do decide to go ahead and download the reference and the line drawing and everything, and you decide to do this, have a spare piece of paper or sketchbook nearby so that you can like test out your mixes before you lay them down on your final paper. And speaking of paper, I am using the Fabriano Artistico cold press paper in this video. I enjoy both the soft press and the cold press. You know my favorite is the soft press, but I bought a ton of cold press because I'm making sketchbooks and I got it on sale. And so, yeah, I really enjoy this texture. Even though it's not my top favorite, it is, out of all the cold press papers out there, it is like hands down my favorite. Okay, so here I'm kind of charging in. They call it charging. To me, that just means I have wet paint and I'm dropping in more pigment with my brush. So I'm not manipulating the paint that's already there. Of course, those pigments are going to move, but I'm just adding more paint to that wet area. That is known as charging. I don't understand why it's called charging. I'm sure there's a reason. So right there, I was just adding a little more hematite genuine, and I added more on the nose. So as you're following along with this, just keep layering. Dry between layers, keep layering. Here I'm using some transparent red oxide for around the nose. There's kind of a reddish area. So you're going to want to keep looking at that reference photo. That is key. And squint your eyes at it so that you can see the values. I've also provided a black and white version so that you can see where your values are, because color can kind of be distracting. All right, I'm grabbing some transparent brown oxide now. I'm going to add a little depth and darkness to around the nose. Do you see how I'm hesitating? Anytime you see my brush hover and I hesitate, it's because I'm looking at my reference. I'm squinting at my reference to see what needs to happen next and how dark it needs to be. I'm going to go ahead and add the reference photo here so that you can kind of see what I'm going for. You can also pause this video and click on the link and go download the reference yourself. I think it's really helpful to have the reference in front of you while you're watching this so that you can understand why I'm making the decisions that I'm making. That's just really important. A lot of times I see artists doing tutorials and they're not showing the reference, and for me that's super confusing because I don't know what's influencing their decisions. I don't know why they're doing what they're doing. And so I really would love if you would take a minute and go download that. It's totally free. There is a discount code that when you click on the link that will automatically be applied at checkout. I can't have the reference photo up for too long on here because it kind of covers up some of the screen. But yeah, head on over there and grab that. And here I'm using some transparent red oxide to add that kind of reddish tint around the mouth. Look at that hematite granulation, you guys. Look at that hematite granulation. If you don't know what I'm talking about, and you haven't used hematite, it is those black speckles around the nose. All right, so now I'm using some burnt umber, one final layer around the mouth. Here's the deal, guys. It's watercolor. It dries so much lighter than when you first put it down. And so I find myself doing sometimes 5, 6, 10 layers. It just depends. But here on the mouth, you can see I thought the paint was going to be so much darker when I first put it down. I ended up just going straight in with burnt umber and calling it a day because it just wasn't dark enough. See how that made it pop? How darkening the area on the chin made the muzzle kind of pop out a little bit. That's how we get that 3D effect, and that's how we get that depth and contrast. And so now I'm just doing another layer on the nose itself, around the nose. What do we call that? The muzzle. Just adding another layer. This time it's a little bit reddish. Oh yeah, that just really gives it some depth. If you feel like your paintings look flat, sometimes you just need to keep layering to give it some depth. Sometimes you need more contrast. You need one area to be dark and one area to be lighter. So it just comes with playing around really and painting. Cute little chin wrinkles there. So I laid those down, but I am going to come in with my brush and soften them. You can leave a hard edge if you want, but I usually come in and soften my edges selectively. I'll leave a hard edge here and there, as you can see. I really like the idea of lost and found edges. So I do soften, but I do leave little bits here and there that are hard. You guys will have to tell me in the comments, is this boring? I thought about just doing some Halloween music over this and making it fun, doing it at times time lapse. But I also wanted this to be interactive, and I wanted you to be able to follow along and get a taste of kind of like what it's like to paint with me. So I love Halloween, and I wanted to do something fun. But yeah, you'll have to tell me what do you think? Next time, should I do like some sections where there's a time lapse and music and some sections where I talk, or do you like hearing me jabber the entire time? Let me know. I can handle it. All right, one more layer with that Van Dyke brown to darken it up a little bit more. I'm loving the textures I got there with the reddish tint with the transparent red oxide. Fantastic. I've got all 3 of the transparent oxides on my dot card. I love them. And one more layer on the nose. You got to be careful with noses, because if you do too many layers, you end up losing detail, you end up losing contrast, and it just falls kind of flat. So it's a delicate balance. Ooh, look at that paint spread. I love that. It's magical. And here I am just kind of sucking back some of that. It kind of spread further than I wanted it to. You can lift wet paint. You can lift dry and wet. I enjoy lifting wet paint because you just kind of dry your brush off a little bit and it acts like a sponge and it sucks up the paint. And like I said, sometimes paint gets lighter as you go, especially your darker values you laid down at the beginning. So I will often go back and darken nostrils, darken pupils, darken the eyeliner, as we're calling it. So that's what I'm doing here, is just bringing back those dark values. It's always interesting watching myself paint, like going back and editing a video and watching myself paint, because it's really interesting seeing how I hesitate and I hover the brush, because I'm almost letting the reference talk to me. I'm translating the reference onto the paper with my eyes, which is just really something that has come from time and experience and practice and play. And I really enjoy that process. I'm just kind of adding some of those dots that are on the muzzle. They don't need to be obvious. They don't need to stand out too much. In fact, sometimes I'll put them down and then, as you'll see, I will grab my finger and just kind of dab at them. I don't want them to be standing out and obvious. There we go. I'm going to mess everything up. I put paint down, I mess it up. It's one of my mottos is put down paint, mess it up. It's kind of what breaks me from my perfectionism, I guess. So I have a tendency to want to try to make things too neat and tidy and perfect. Alright, so now I'm switching to a larger brush. This is a Polina Bright. I'm not sure what size it is. Maybe we'll see. This is Payne's Gray. And I think I added... What did I add to it? I'm adding Burnt Umber to the Payne's Gray for the shadow areas on the sheet. So I'm laying paint down on dry paper. And then, as you will see, I'm going to clean my brush off. And I'm going to smooth it out after. So that's what I'm doing here. That brush does not have paint in it. It just has water. Not a lot of water, just enough to help this paint kind of soften that edge. I'm leaving the one edge, the edge on the left needs to be hard and the edge on the right needs to be soft. Now that it's wet, I could potentially do some wet and wet. I could drop in some darker pigment. I'm really just trying to soften that. Sometimes the line I put down just dries, or it starts drying really quickly, or it gets too dark and too hard, and so I try to soften it. So now I'm just going in on the top of the head. So Payne's Gray is a cool gray, and so by adding a little bit of burnt umber to it, I can neutralize it. I really enjoy painting on white, whether it's fur or a ghost sheet. I really enjoy doing some negative painting and looking at shadows. Shadows aren't just gray or whatever. They are definitely either cool or warm. Sometimes shadow has light in it. And that's something that I'm really new at playing around with, and I'm loving it. So this is a great exercise in learning how to do negative painting as well as learning how to paint shadows. And as I say, white is rarely white. So the area around the eye where the sheet is, there's kind of a little flap. So you can see I put some gray down where that sheet is kind of folded up and cut. And that's what's going to help give you that dimension. I love these brushes. They have such a fine point to them. Okay, so did you see that? I washed my brush off and then I used it to soften that paint that I put down. And I also noticed it was a little too dark. And so essentially kind of erased it, lifted it back up because it just felt way too dark. So when you go about painting the sheet, this is really fun. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is where you can kind of just experiment. And look at the folds on the sheet on the reference photo. And just do your best to make sure that you're adding the shadows where they go. And also maybe experiment with putting paint down on dry paper, cleaning your brush off, dabbing it on a towel, and then using that damp brush to soften. I'm washing my brush and now using that damp, actually kind of wet brush. As I got into the sheet, as I do a pet portrait, as I start moving on to the body area, like the chest and neck area, I start to use more water. I use a bigger brush. I get sloppier and messier and splashier. And so I decided on this sheet that that's where I would have fun and I would be a little bit messier. I'd grab a little bit of a bigger brush. And as you'll see, I will do some fun splashes here pretty soon. And now I'm just looking at the folds. How are the folds, what direction are those folds moving in, and how do they look? Where's the hard edges? Where's the soft edges? That's really a fun process. And because I'm going to be doing the same thing for the next couple of minutes over and over again, here is a sped up version set to some fun music. Here you go, enjoy. Okay, once I feel like I had the sheet pretty well done, I had a ton of layers on there, I went ahead and started splashing some Payne's Gray and some burnt umber all over the bottom. Now, with splashes, I'm kind of strategic. I don't just splash anywhere, and I will often cover the face of the dog or whatever I'm painting, and I'll do splashes just kind of down at the bottom. It's subtle, but it just adds some whimsy and fun and looseness to it. And of course, every time I think I'm done, I end up going for a walk or taking a break and come back and see where I need to darken. So that's essentially what I did to here. Went back and added a little bit more of that Payne's Gray to give it some depth. And here I'm just kind of sucking back up some of that paint because it bled too far. This was such a fun painting. Oh, I loved it. I had so much fun. And here is where I'm going to make some more splashes. I'm doing some up at the top. I've got that transparent brown oxide. And what's really fun is I don't always leave my splashes alone. I will often splash more water in, or I'll take my finger and mess them up. But here is the final painting. I would love to know if you guys followed along. Please let me know. And I am so grateful for you being here. I hope you have an amazing week and happy Halloween.